also in the Maliki madhab. Now, when you pray the Dhuhr prayer, the time for Asr comes in. It's the time, the two times at the waqt al-daruri wal-ikhtiyari. And so just to correct this, for instance, even those who do three times of prayer, like the Ja'faris, they admit it's not it's a rukhsa, it's not an obligation, and often they don't. And there are some Salafis who do it also, who combine the prayers, because the Prophet did at one point without any particular reason. But my question is regarding the role of the Prophet ﷺ in the Muslim community, and how do we read the Quranic verses, Man ata'a al-Rasul faqad ata'a Allah, he who obeys the messenger obeys Allah, and many others, many other verses, and particularly the one which says La wa rabbika la wa rabbuka la yu'minu
فلا وربك لا يؤمنون
حتى يحكموك فيما شجر
بينهم ويسلموا
ثم لا يجدوا في أنفسهم حرجا مما قضيت
ويسلموا تسليما. This verse is a key verse about the authority of the Prophet, and I think Muslims, maybe based on Shafi'i's work, have come to the conclusion that the Prophet remains the Imam of the Muslims even after his death, and he remains the Imam of the Muslims through Sunnah.
Yes, that's certainly Shafi's point.
Yeah, and then Al-Ghazali in his Ihya Ulum al-Din talks about the Muta', he who should be obeyed. It could be that Surah 81 is referring there to Jibreel, but Shafi'i refers it to, Ghazali to the Prophet. So I think that Shafi'i's ideas are very important, and that's why they became so widely accepted. Because they are very, very important. And thank you for your presentation to show us that.
Any comments?
Well, certainly Shafi's idea of obedience is to the Rasul, and that has become the majority point of view. As I said, the opponents will say following the Quran is obeying the Rasul, without the other things, which is why Shafi brought in the discussion of religious practices.
Yeah.
And there aren't madhabs that reduce the salats, but if you look at, for example, the most radical rejectors of the Hadith reject them as even any kind of history. And they go entirely to the Quran, and you have people among them who will say there are 3 salats a day. There are people among them, but they do not constitute a madhab, at least not as yet.
Yeah.
But there are individuals who do make the arguments that there's 2 salats.
But there are Quranic allusions to more than one salat. I'm very happy to have Brother Hisham to help me all the time.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I mean it,
Yes.
because I'm not as a hafiz li kitabillah as I should be, but this what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that you should pray at the 2 ends of the day, طرفي النهار وعند دلوك الشمس وزلفا من الليل, and then دلوك الشمس, and then Quran al-Fajr. So who says there are only 3 prayers?
Well, it depends on how they read the verses. They will say, for instance, that there's 3 salats mentioned: Salat al-Isha, Salat al-Maghrib. Well, there's Fajr, They look at the word salat in the Quran, and they look at that word and they find salat mentioned with salat al-wusta, salat al-isha, and I think salat al-fajr are three terms that appear in the Quran, so they bring them together. Then there are people who argue for two salats because this is taraf nahar, and Duluka Shamsi is one of the taraf nahar. So this is what I'm saying when I say Shafi'is fear that people would do whatever they want and call it salat. And when I say they're looking at the same verses, there are people who make these arguments for the idea that salat is not even a ritual prayer. So they can take the linguistic analysis of the Quran to very great lengths when they don't have the broader framework of the tradition to restrict that somehow.
I think the three times of Salat al-Nahar and Salat al-Layliyah and Maghrib, it's mentioned in the Quran. This is why Madhab Imam Malik, especially the Malikiya, divided this time through the Quran.
Yeah.
This is why. Tarafay al-Nahar, that means between the days, and Zulafan min al-Layl, wa Quran al-Fajr, the three times.
Yes.
This is why they
and so this is why we get the distinctions. But all I'm saying, I'm not arguing that there are only two or there are only three. I'm not making an argument for the number of salats. I'm making the argument that there are right. I'm not making an argument for specific times of salat. What I'm telling you is that there are people that make these arguments that widely disagree with each other on even what salat is. And this was Shafi's concern.
I think he did not disagree about the salat itself.
You haven't read some of the opinions I've read today. There are people
only all the time of the salat.
Right, historically, yes.
They came up to divide the time between time ikhtiyari and time
historically, yes, this is true. However, we do see Muslims today, people who call themselves Muslims, people who reject the Hadith.
Can I ask another...
I think Dawood wants to be able to keep a little control.
Can we come back, Dr. Ayub?
Okay, come back. Yeah,
okay, Dr. Farhan, check.
Thank you very much, sister.
You're welcome.
I just had a question on permanence and impermanence of the prophetic tradition. Now, I wrote out my thoughts.
No, it's okay.
So basically, I come with an assumption that the Quran, the Muslim has a relationship with the Quran based on permanence, but a relationship with the Sunnah that is both permanent and impermanent. Now, I want to get insight from this, and precisely because of a lot of young Muslims, particularly being raised here in North America, have this attitude towards some of the controversial hadiths, or just outright reject it. In the sense of not rejecting the entire edifice of the prophetic tradition,